Bill Jasper with the New American Magazine, and I'm here in Las Vegas at the Heartland Institute's 9th International Conference on Climate Change. And I'm very fortunate to have here all the way from England, we have James Delingpole. James, good to meet you. I've been reading your stuff for a long time. You've written for The Telegraph and for a number of other publications in the UK.
Yeah.
But you made a shift here to Breitbart.
Yeah, I'm the executive editor of Breitbart London, which is the European outpost of Breitbart, and we're already making waves, causing trouble. I think that's part of the raison d'être of the Breitbart group.
That's right, and you did a pretty good job of it even before being associated with Breitbart. You just seem to have a way of tweaking the BBC and the British government, and particularly on the issue of climate change, but certainly not limited to that. You cover a number of different issues.
Yeah, I think this goes back to my childhood. I was not a naughty kid at school, but I was always entertaining the class in a kind of clever way, in a way that wasn't disruptive necessarily, but was possibly distracting. And yeah, I suppose in my adult life, if I've grown up, that is, I've got quite good at tweaking the noses of the establishment.
So you were with the Telegraph, though, for a number of years, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the days of print journalism, I was on the staff of the Telegraph for a very long time, but those days are gone. I mean, I know there are still print journals around, but really the internet is king these days.
So you have written quite a bit on climate change, and how did you get involved in that issue?
Well, that's a good question. I did not get in it because I'm terribly interested in science. We're at Heartland now, and there are lots of very erudite men and women who dedicated their lives to examining different aspects of why climate changes. This is not my area. I'm an English literature graduate, but what I am interested in is, I suppose, what you might call the culture wars aspect of climate change, because when you look into this debate, it really isn't a scientific one at all. It's not going to be one of those issues which is going to be resolved one day when scientists magically discover that the formula which shows them the extent to which CO2 drives world temperatures. It's not going to happen. The debate has been arranged in such a way by the alarmists that it can never be resolved, that anthropogenic warming theory can never be falsified, which technically makes it unscientific. Any scientific proposition ought to be falsifiable, and I can say that as an English literature graduate, even though I know that many of the alleged scientists on the other side of the debate don't seem to understand this rather key point. So one of my jobs as a journalist is to report on the science, but not I don't attempt to break the science myself, but I'm also there to point out the economic damage being done by climate change alarmism and the environmental movement generally, and I'm there to point out the corruption that has taken place, the way that politicians and big business and the green movement, green NGOs, have got into bed with these corrupted scientists.
At the first Heartland conference I was at, there were a couple of your colleagues from Britain, scientists, who were there, and I asked them, this relates strongly to you, I asked them, I said, well, do you see, not just in the science here, but there is a political agenda behind this, because every one of the solutions to this alleged crisis calls for transferring more and more power to a political elite. And I won't say the name, but a couple of the prominent British scientists said, oh, you American right-wingers, you see political conspiracies everywhere. And does that seem outlandish to you?
No, it's not outlandish. And I think, look, I have a lot of respect for the scientists, but they are scientists. They do what scientists do. They're about precision. They're not really, a lot of them are not really up to speed with politics. They don't really get it. And also, I think there's a sense of dog in the manger, if you have that phrase in America. They want to see it as their debate. They feel uncomfortable with outsiders like me. I mean, they'll tolerate me as a kind of licensed jester. But at the same time, I think there's a gentle hint of resentment that somebody who's unqualified should come in and start stirring things up in this debate. But the fact is, this is a political debate. It's ultimately about money, about political control, about a view of the world. Julian Simon was very good on this. I came to Julian Simon via Bjorn Lomborg's Skeptical Environmentalist. You remember the story about how the skeptical... Are you familiar with the Skeptical Environmentalist?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I've interviewed him a couple of times.
Okay, well, as you know, Lomborg was a left-leaning Greenpeace member, statistician. And one day he set his class the task of demolishing the dodgy science of Julian Simon. And Lomborg discovered, to his shock, horror, that Lomborg was right. Oh, sorry, that Julian Simon was right. And Julian Simon traced the way our thinking has changed as a culture. He examined scientific textbooks and noticed how ones that were written before the 1950s, say, the animal kingdom was judged according to its uses to man. Animals were very much seen as subordinate to mankind, so that when you saw maybe crows being discussed, well, crows are a pest to farmers. And then he noticed this gradual shift where suddenly animals were given equal status to humans. And this is the development of in thinking of the environmental movement. There is a misanthropy.
Right, and his most famous book, The Ultimate Resource, saw man as the pinnacle of the natural world. And that was the dominant view up until the environmental movement, New Age movement, flipped things in the last...
Well, you can also see it as symptomatic of the replacement of one religion with a new religion.
Right.
I mean, Christianity, in which man is... I mean, the world exists essentially for man's pleasure. The beasts are subordinate to man. But environmentalists, ecologists particularly, believe that, no, we're all the same. In fact, worse than that, you know the phrase, the earth has a cancer and the cancer is man. So, okay, so there's misanthropy. That's one thing. So mankind is seen as a problem, not as a good thing. But there's also, I mean, a sort of anti-capitalist, anti-Western civilization element to the Green Movement. The very title of one of their key bestseller, I think, Limits to Growth, written by the Club of Rome, it posited the idea, which has become very popular, that economic growth, the very thing that drives us to improve our lives, to improve medical technology, that helps our lives in any number of ways and creates jobs for our children and our grandchildren. They are rejecting this.
These are evils.
They're rejecting them as evils, which I consider in and of itself an evil viewpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, it has horrendous consequences for all of humanity, as well as for the planet.
And particularly the poor. It's weird that so many environmental NGOs are talking about the injustice of the difference between the standards of living in the West and in Africa. And yet the policies they are pursuing are making life much, much harder for the poorest people, because they're the ones that are hit most when food prices are driven up by biofuels, when energy prices are driven up by renewables subsidies. Who gets hit hardest?
Unless they have access to the hydrocarbon fuels, meaning the coal, oil, natural gas, and eventually nuclear power, they have no hope of lifting themselves up out of the terrible poverty that they're in. So Do you see many of your colleagues in Europe and England getting this?
Well, I'm still something of an outsider and a freak, I think. I mean, look at the guys who've been, half the media at this conference are left-wing trolls who've come to
Trash the...
defecate from a great height on all of us. And it's, you kind of think there would be an element of curiosity. You kind of think they might have listened to Patrick Moore from Greenpeace. I mean, I thought he gave a really good speech setting out the terms and showing how much hotter the temperature, the climate average was in the Holocene optimum, for example, when CO2 levels were much, much higher. You know, we are living in a mini ice age. We're just coming out of a mini ice age. It seems they're not even willing to entertain the possibility that they might be wrong, and that I find that rather frightening. And they are, I suppose, they're the SS, if you like, of the media. But then the mainstream media is still pretty, to continue the analogy, pretty Nazi-ish.